Mother's Day in Dallas was warm and bright, the kind of day that usually reminded Helen Montgomery of gentler years' flowers in the yard, her husband alive, her son still a boy running through the hallway. Now 67, widowed, and living alone in a small aging house, Helen's world had become smaller, a leaking roof, growing medical bills, and meals often made from canned goods provided by the church pantry. Even so, she kept her home tidy, her garden blooming, and her faith steady. That afternoon, her son Andrew Montgomery arrived unexpectedly, carrying a bouquet of lilies. At 38, he was a successful tech entrepreneur, living a life far removed from hers Tesla in the driveway, a mansion in an upscale neighborhood, and a calendar booked with business meetings. But when he smiled at her, she saw the little boy she once held close. Helen brewed tea and sat with him in the living room, sunlight pooling on the old carpet. Then Andrew asked the question that pierced straight through her calm. "Mom, my wife still sends you $5,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." Helen blinked, stunned. She had lived the past 8 months on donated groceries and the generosity of church volunteers. $5,000 a month? She had never seen a single dollar. Her hands trembled slightly. "Son, the church is helping me get by." Andrew's expression shifted confusion, worry, then something darker. Before he could ask more, the front door opened, and Vanessa Montgomery walked in, heels clicking against the floor. In her pearl-colored silk dress and expensive perfume, she looked like she had stepped out of a luxury magazine, not a modest Dallas home. With a sugary smile, she said, "Oh, Mother, you must have forgotten. I stop by every month to bring the money." Helen met her gaze steadily. "If you did bring it, then it must have gotten lost somewhere." The room fell into thick silence. Andrew looked between them, clearly unsettled. "Vanessa, you have been bringing the money, right? I transfer it to you every month." Vanessa placed a delicate hand on Andrew's arm. "Of course, Andrew. Maybe your mother just forgot. Old age, you know, memory fades." The words hit Helen hard. People had been using old age against her ever since her husband died, using it to dismiss her concerns, overwrite her truths, make her doubt her own mind. But Helen remembered everything, every bill, every pill, every loaf of bread given by kind neighbors, and she knew with absolute clarity that Vanessa had never brought her a single envelope. Andrew squeezed Helen's shoulder. "Mom, don't worry. I'll check the accounts. I just want you to live comfortably." Helen gave him a soft smile, but in her chest something solidified, something sharp and determined. When the house grew quiet again after they left, she sat at the table, replaying every detail. 8 months, $40,000, money that could have repaired her roof, replaced her broken refrigerator, and given her back a measure of dignity. She opened her old notebook and wrote 2 lines. "Find the truth. Don't trust fake tears." From that moment, the gentle widow became a woman with purpose. She began documenting everything, every visit, every call, every lie, and the storm inside her quietly awakened. The next morning, with her worn purse tucked under her arm, Helen Montgomery walked to First Texas Community Bank. Her steps were slow but firm. She approached the teller, placed her passbook on the counter, and asked, "Could you check if there have been any transfers from Andrew Montgomery? He says he's been sending me $5,000 every month." The teller scanned the records, then looked up with gentle sympathy. "No transfers at all, Mrs. Montgomery. Only a small interest payment this year." Helen thanked her, walked out into the warm Dallas breeze, and stood frozen on the sidewalk. 8 months. No money. Nothing. All while her son believed she was being supported. That afternoon at Street Mary's church, Reverend Samuel Pierce noticed her lingering after the service. "Mrs. Montgomery, you look troubled," he said softly. Helen managed a thin smile. "I'm just trying to understand why my son's help never reached me." "The truth always finds its way," the Reverend replied. "Don't lose heart." But later that night, sitting at her small kitchen table under a dim lamp, Helen realized the truth wouldn't arrive on its own. She would have to go after it. She opened the brown leather notebook Andrew had given her years ago and began writing everything she could remember: dates, visits, excuses, exact wording. June 14. Vanessa brought a cake. Said the bank must be delayed, no envelope. July 12. Called with charity meeting, heard music from a restaurant. August 10. Promised to come. Didn't. The pattern became unmistakable. Weeks later, Vanessa pulled up to the house in a brand new silver Lexus, carrying a decorative gift basket. Helen poured iced tea on the porch and watched carefully. "Vanessa," she asked evenly, "where's this month's $5,000? The younger woman laughed lightly. "Oh, I must have left it in the car." Helen looked at the freshly purchased Lexus. "Quite a car. Must have cost a lot." "Oh, not really," Vanessa said. "My work requires a professional image." Helen only nodded, but something sharpened in her eyes. That evening, Helen walked to the post office's public phone and dialed Andrew's company. "Accounting department, please." A woman named Sandra answered. Helen asked carefully whether $5,000 transfers had been leaving Andrew's account. Sandra hesitated, then said, "I can't reveal personal details, but yes, 8 transfers, each $5,000. The recipient name matches yours, Mrs. Montgomery, but the account number isn't the one you gave us years ago." Another account, under her name, but not hers. 2 days later, there was a knock at Helen's door. Standing on the porch was Leonard Briggs, chief accountant at Andrew's firm. A tall man in a charcoal suit, he held a leather briefcase and concern in his eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, "I think you deserve the truth." At her kitchen table, he opened the briefcase and slid a thick folder toward her. Inside were copies of every transfer. "Your daughter-in-law opened an account using your name," Leonard explained. "All 8 payments went there. She forged your identification, and she has been using the company credit card for personal expenses, spa bills, flights, even a car payment." Helen felt her breath catch. "So my son doesn't know any of this?" Leonard shook his head. "No, but if you want justice, Mrs. Montgomery, I'll help you build the case." Helen closed the folder gently, as though holding something sacred and deadly. "I want the truth," she said. "All of it." The storm inside her had fully awakened. 3 days after receiving the folder of evidence, Helen Montgomery made a quiet decision. She dialed her son's number, keeping her voice warm and steady. "Andrew, I'd love to have you and Vanessa for dinner this Sunday. It's been too long." Andrew agreed instantly, his tone grateful, tired, and unaware of the storm waiting beneath the surface. On Sunday, Helen prepared his childhood favorites: honey-roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, apple walnut salad, and warm pie. She set the table with her late husband's polished silverware and lit soft candles. To anyone else, the scene would look like a simple, loving family dinner. But Helen wasn't setting a table. She was setting a trap. The silver Lexus arrived right on time. Vanessa stepped out first in a jade silk dress, perfectly composed, perfectly elegant. Andrew followed with a bouquet of white lilies. "You look wonderful, Mom," he said, hugging Helen gently. "I'm better than ever," she replied. "Come, sit. Dinner's ready." They ate. They laughed. They talked about nothing of importance: her garden, the weather, a neighbor who got a new dog. Helen waited patiently, letting the room settle into warmth. She watched Vanessa relax, watched her confidence grow with every sip of wine. Then, in the gentlest tone, Helen said, "I truly appreciate the support you two have given me, especially this month's $5,000. Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile built to manipulate. "Oh, Mother, it's nothing. I just want to help." Helen nodded thoughtfully. "I'm curious, though. What day do you usually send it?" Vanessa didn't hesitate. "The 10th every month." Andrew frowned. "No, honey. The auto transfer is set for the 15th. I told you that. That's the day payroll hits." The room went silent. Vanessa's smile froze at the edges. Andrew's expression shifted, confusion turning slowly into suspicion. Helen picked up her glass calmly. "Well, on the 15th I'll go to the bank again, just to make sure everything is working properly." Vanessa let out a tight laugh. "Oh, Mother, you're so careful. But yes, it's been sent." But Andrew was no longer reassured. His eyes lingered on Vanessa's face a little too long, as if seeing her for the first time. After they left that night, the candles still flickering on the empty table, Helen sat at her computer and typed a message to Leonard Briggs and attorney Olivia Grant. She slipped. She said the 10th. Andrew said the 15th. Prepare everything. We move forward. Within the hour, Leonard replied. The bank confirmed the fake account. Everything is ready. Olivia followed. I will assemble the legal documents. Be cautious. She will panic when the truth gets close. Helen closed her laptop, exhaled slowly, and walked to the window. The night outside was dark and still, but her resolve was sharper than ever. For 8 months, lies had filled her home. Now, the truth was coming quietly, steadily, and impossible to escape. After the dinner where Vanessa slipped on the dates and contradicted herself, Helen Montgomery knew the time for quiet observation was over. She had the contradiction she needed. She had Leonard's documents. And now, she had to bring everything into the open clearly, calmly, and in front of her son. 2 days later, Helen invited Andrew and Vanessa to her home again, telling them she needed help reviewing some financial paperwork. There was no meal this time, no candles, no small talk. Just Helen's worn wooden table and a beige envelope placed squarely at the center. Andrew arrived looking uneasy. Vanessa followed closely behind, her smile tight, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit. Helen sat down and folded her hands. Andrew, I'd like you to look at something. She slid the first bank statement across the table. Andrew scanned it and froze. Recipient, Vanessa Montgomery. Amount, $5,000. Date, 15th of each month. He swallowed hard. Vanessa, why is your name on this? Vanessa forced a laugh. That must be an error. Before she could finish, a calm voice came from the doorway. No, Mr. Montgomery, there's no error. Leonard Briggs, holding a folder of documents, stepped into the room. Helen had asked him to come exactly at this moment after Vanessa had already denied the obvious. Leonard laid out the papers one by one. The forged authorization forms, the fake account opened using Helen's name, the company credit card statements, the spa charges, flights, and Lexus payments. Andrew stared at them, each page draining more color from his face. Vanessa, his voice trembled. You forged my mother's ID? You opened an account in her name? Vanessa's mask finally cracked. I only borrowed it. I was going to pay it back. Helen looked at her steadily. You didn't borrow. You lied. For 8 months. Andrew slammed a fist onto the table. I trusted you with everything. You let my mother suffer while you lived like royalty. Vanessa burst into tears, grabbed her purse, and fled the house without another word. Within a week, attorney Olivia Grant filed a formal case for elder financial exploitation. In court, Olivia presented everything. Leonard's testimony, the forged papers, the transaction records, and Helen's meticulous notes. The judge ruled quickly. Vanessa was ordered to repay the $40,000, was barred from handling any of Andrew's financial accounts, and had to complete a rehabilitation program. As the gavel struck, Helen felt no victory, only a quiet, heavy sadness. The truth was out. Justice was served. But the pieces left behind were sharp, and they belonged to her son. After the verdict, Helen Montgomery returned to her quiet house, the weight of everything settling onto her shoulders. She had won on paper. The truth was recognized, the money was ordered to be repaid, and Vanessa was barred from touching Andrew's finances ever again. But victories like this were never clean. Andrew stopped calling. He didn't visit. He didn't even send a short message. Helen understood why. His marriage had collapsed under the weight of lies, and he needed time to face the embarrassment of having defended the wrong person for so long. Shame builds walls taller than anger, and Helen respected his silence. Weeks passed. Helen tried to focus on practical things, fixing her roof, sorting old papers, attending church. When the $40,000 restitution finally arrived, she stared at the bank receipt a long time before letting out a slow, steady breath. The money represented pain, but she refused to let it end as pain. She used only a small portion for essential repairs. The rest she carried to Reverend Samuel Pierce and attorney Olivia Grant. I don't want this money to rot in bitterness, she said. I want it to help others like me. Together, they formed the Grace Hands Foundation, a small volunteer effort based in the church basement. 3 desks, an old printer, a hand-painted sign. Nothing fancy, but every week, elderly victims came seeking someone who finally believed them. Helen listened to each one, gently guiding them toward justice. Life regained quiet rhythm. Yet every evening, when the house grew still, she found herself looking at the framed photo of Andrew as a boy. She whispered small prayers, not for punishment, not for closure, but for her son's healing. Then, one stormy night, her doorbell rang. When she opened it, Andrew stood there soaked from the rain, eyes swollen and exhausted. "Mom," his voice cracked, "I'm so sorry." He stepped inside and broke down, shoulders shaking, tears falling freely, the weight of months crashing all at once. He sank to his knees, guilt spilling from him in broken sentences. Helen knelt beside him and placed a hand on his back. "Andrew, stand up, son. We all lose our way. What matters is finding it again." Between the sound of rain and the soft glow of the living room lamp, something in him finally unclenched. He rested his head on her shoulder like he once did as a child. "You didn't lose everything," Helen whispered. "You came home. That's enough." And in that quiet moment, something broken between them finally began to mend. Not because of the court's judgment or the returned money, but because honesty had finally found its way home. Mother and son held on to each other, rebuilding the only thing that truly mattered: trust. Their bond, tested but unbroken, rose stronger than the betrayal that tried to destroy it.